Hi guys, welcome back to the Pierre Subeh experience. Today is our first episode of 2024, believe it or not. It's somewhere in February and I took a month off. More than a month off actually, but I needed it. I'm working on a lot of really exciting projects and I don't want to come on here and not give you value. So today we're going to talk about complex relationships and their breakups. We're going to explore the psychology and behavioral science of why we hold on to relationships, why we lose our self-worth sometimes, how do we deal with breakups, how do we deal with heartbreak, how do we collect ourselves and stay strong. And I would not be able to do that alone. I understand that this is a very sensitive topic, so before moving forward, I do want to let you know that everything we discuss today is not medical, professional health advice, mental health advice. This is just a conversation between me and a licensed therapist. And to jump straight into it, today I'm speaking to the wonderful, the incredible Kelly Minter, who is a Florida-based licensed therapist. She is a YouTuber. She makes incredible content on YouTube, and she practices therapy. So you can go to her website, which I will find for you. Her website, her company called Anchored Counseling, anchoredcounselingfl.com to work directly with her. But I'm going to jump right into it. Today's episode is going to be very juicy. So let's hear the conversation that I had with Kelly. How can I, and can everyone listening, how can we all have self-worth that is internal so that we don't have to depend on external forces?
Yeah. So we start with one of the things that I tell clients to do is to make a list. 5 things. Start with 5 things. We love to extend the list later, which is great, something to achieve. But we start with 5 things that you know. Me, I know my name is Kelly. I have a dog, and my dog's name is Leo. Like, these are 5 things. No one can refute these statements. So I'm not saying I'm good at baking, because that can be, up to interpretation, right?
Subjective.
But if I know, right, so they're completely like objectively true things, that no subjection at all, right? And then when you feel kind of, I call it swirly, it's kind of a weird word, I guess, but when you feel all in your head about your worth and about things, you go back and you read this list. And it does sound, I know, but it's not like to do with your worth or what you're good at. It sounds a little like that won't work. But what it does is it grounds you in fact, and it grounds you in present. And then you can move forward in what you're doing with the grounding in present. Because when we work out of our knowledge base of ourselves, we do our best work. When we work out of our assumed information, our assumed worth from other people, we do bad work because we don't know what other people are thinking in reality. And that's how you build it. That's how you start to build it. And then as you have accomplishments, you find objective ways to put those accomplishments in that list that you can say, I did. So it's like, I did my best at this thing, not I am the best at this thing, right? Because you know if you did your best. You don't know if you are the best.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if you did your best, I mean, even what you mentioned earlier about imposter syndrome, look, I can be really, really good at podcasting, but it doesn't make me a perfect person that now has this. Just because you've appreciated that you like a podcast episode doesn't mean that now you think I'm a perfect person. So it's really a lot of self-conversation. You have to have those conversations with yourself and say like, hey, good job you for doing this.
Right.
But it doesn't elevate me. Right now, Kelly's not looking at me as a friend and thinking, okay, he's perfect. He can't make no mistake.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's a difficult thing because I told you earlier, like if let's say Kelly complimented Pierre, great. Kelly didn't compliment Pierre, great. We cannot depend on validation from external parties. But then even if you do depend on them, it still haunts you in a bad way because now if you support me, I'm under pressure because now you're looking and I feel that you're looking. And if you don't support me, now I'm under pressure because I feel like you're not supportive. So it's this cycle.
It's always, you'll always lose. You'll always lose in those situations.
Yeah.
And so when you keep the measurement internal, then you know what you're measuring. You know what you're measuring against too, because you're there. You're you know?
a lot of people say this question, but they
Hmm.
say, "Hey, I was in a relationship with a person, and this individual, this person has cheated on me, has
Mm.
broken the promise, and or has lied to me. But it's okay because they're in a specific part of their journey, because they were in a religious background, because of this,
Mm.
because of that, because of this." And your response usually on your YouTube channel is, "Well, that's their problem."
Right. That's on them.
Yeah. And so is that, how do
Hmm.
we live with that? Can you elaborate on that advice?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I see people do a lot, especially if they are in a relationship and they are wronged, it's very easy to excuse the wrong the harm that someone's done to you because you want to give them grace and you want to give them forgiveness, and also you don't want to lose them, right? But like someone treating you poorly is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their behavior. It's literally their behavior. And so when someone does something wrong to you or someone lies to you or betrays you, it doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't make you foolish. You are someone who trusted someone, and there's nothing wrong with that. Trusting the wrong person, I don't actually think is a thing because trust is like a personal thing. It's like an inside job. But what
Mm,
someone does with your trust is not your, that needs to be separate, right? From like your worth, because someone betraying your trust is a decision, maybe not a conscious one, but a decision that they've made. And that is on them. That is their burden to bear. There's not an excuse for treating another human as less than human.
I love it. Fair and straight to the point. And that ties into a question that came in from someone that watches all the time. They said, "What's the method to getting over someone quickly?"
Oh, so quickly is subjective. Quickly is very subjective. So there used to be this quote. I remember it so well because I was like, that's such a ridiculous statement. Do you cuss on this? Do we cuss or no?
Yeah,
I cannot.
absolutely. Yeah, you
Okay.
can.
I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
such
go
bullshit.
ahead.
Like, this is not even real. Um, so like they used to say it takes half the time you were in the relationship to get over it or to get past it. No, that's ridiculous. Any amount of time that we're going to give someone to grieve or to feel pain is such a ridiculous statement to make. Like, who are we to tell someone they can only have this long or they have to take this long? The keys to getting over a relationship, to getting past a heartbreak, especially, or a break in trust, or any kind of like relationship leaving your life, is first of all knowing yourself and being real about your emotions. When someone is leaving your life, you are not going to always feel terrible about it. That also doesn't mean you're over it, right? Like, just because you're not
Yeah.
crying one day and you are the next doesn't mean you're a mess. It means you're a human. So you're going to go through these pieces where you identify your emotions and you you have to feel it to get through it, or if somebody say you have to feel it to heal it. I don't, it's, that's kind of trite, but
Mm,
you have to feel something and acknowledge it and believe yourself when you tell yourself you're hurt. Fun fact about the human brain: you can actually only hold one emotion in its height for 6 minutes. That's it. After that, it lessens. If you can sit in a pain feeling, like, we want to run from the pain. We want to ignore it. We want to like apply it with alcohol. We want to like, best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody else. Like those, that's sometimes functional. Sometimes you need to do that. But most of the time you need to let yourself feel betrayed, feel sad, feel scared about what the future means without this person's relationship in it. And then you'll get through those feelings once you allow yourself to feel them. And it takes a lot less time to move through them if you're not trying to skip over them. You're not trying to, when you're trying to skip over them, you squash them down and they'll come up
mm,
later. It is so much shorter and faster. So the answer to the question is faster. Feel your feelings. Um, because you can't get to the other side and like have a productive next step in your life if you're still holding on to the baggage that someone gave you and you refuse to put down. Yeah.
wow. Jumping over someone is not going to do anything. So,
Right.
because a lot of people say, including myself, like, "Oh, this wasn't a serious relationship," and advice to friends, maybe you should just go and find another one so you can transition out of this. You're saying
Right.
no, 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 do not do
No.
that.
No. It's so here's the thing. I am all for love and sex and enjoyment and pleasure, like whatever you need. I'm not saying don't like go hook up with someone. I'm saying don't go hook up with someone and not tell them you're just hooking up with them. Like if the people involved in the moving on, like in that physical part of the moving on, right? Because that's what gets said a lot. If the people involved in the physical moving on are all aware this is just a physical thing, I'm just trying to like no, remember there's other things out there. Cool. When we don't tell people, that's not fair, right? But like
Yeah.
this idea of like I'm going to go to the next thing, I'm going to move to the next piece of my life, this next transition, whatever it is, you could have a very real and deep and soulful connection with this person that is always going to be subject to the baggage you brought in because you didn't take the time to deal with that baggage, and things end the
Wow.
way they start. They do. So if something starts in
Yeah.
chaos, it's going to end in chaos. And then you're right back where you started.
Mm. So if someone left you in a relationship by infidelity on their previous one, there's a very high chance that you're going to end up your relationship with this new person in a very similar manner. If something didn't
Right.
start in a good, respectful, I respect you
Right.
way, then what guarantees that it won't end that way? I love
Mhm.
this conversation. I love what we're
Mhm.
talking about because it's a difficult conversation. Closure is next. Closure is
Yeah.
something that I'm sure you hear a lot of your patients talk about. They say, I just
Mhm.
want closure. And I'm going to tell you, I don't believe that we actually want closure. I don't believe that we need closure. I think
Mhm.
it's just the next thing that we can latch onto because we don't want to do the hard work. So we say,
Yeah.
oh, I just need closure. Like, I want to make sure that they don't love me, or I want to make sure that the infidelity was not permanent and it wasn't
Mhm.
intentional. So, what are your thoughts professionally on closure? And is what I'm saying accurate at any realm, or is it not?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think when we say closure, when colloquially it's used, we're talking about I need to reconnect with this person. And because you've lost that connection of that relationship, whatever it is, like if it's a breakup of a relationship and you're like, I need closure, I never understood what happened, da da da. We're saying that is that we want to reconnect with the person. And that's an attempt to keep that connection. That's actually bargaining, basically. But what really needs to happen is that closure can come internally just as easily as it can come externally, right? So if we're looking at it's trying to make sense of a situation that isn't entirely sensical, right? We're trying to make something make sense to us that isn't ever going to make sense in the way we need it to because we're not in the person's head. And we're assuming that it's as significant to them as it is to us. And so we enter into that space hoping for rekindling of some sort, or you leave
Hmm.
hoping the other person wants you back or misses what's there because you miss what's there. And if they miss you, then you're worth something, right? If they could leave you and not miss you, then you're not worth anything or not worth as much, is what we think. But closure is simply finding peace with the situation. And in that way, I think closure is essential in all things. But finding peace does not always mean coming to peaceful end with someone else, right? So like if say you have a parent that you've gone non-contact with and you will not actually get closure to that because your hope is that the parent will change and things will improve and you can, I don't know, maybe at some point be in a relationship again, if that's your hope. You can't get that closure with that person because entering it back into a relationship with that person in any way is giving them that power back, and you went no contact for a reason, right? So the closure that you need is the understanding that this is the best thing for me and my future to have this person not in my life, right? But
Ooh.
we don't always see it that way because we feel like the power is in the other person's court and that's why we want the closure. But so I do. I think that we need closures and we need to come to peace with things. We need to come to terms with the reality of where things are and feel peace about that. But that doesn't always In fact, doesn't usually have to include the other person.
Let's also talk about what to do when there is a breakup, because we're talking about closure. Um, I think regardless of this is so I'm gonna throw a ball in your court of an opinion, and it's very amateur of an opinion because it's not professional. Then you can come in and you can shoot it and fix it as you want to. But what about the concept of, regardless of if you want to go back to this person, if you want to rekindle, if this relationship is going to come back to life or not, that's another subject for another day. At the moment, when a heartbreak or a breakup happens, again, it could be professional, romantic, I would say take all the time to do the work that you need to do in healing and closure, whatever you want to call it, internally, like you mentioned. And then if something comes up, that's phase number two or three or four.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an excellent way to go about it. I think it's really helpful for people to remember why their brain does the what ifs. And so typically, if especially if you are not the one who terminated or ended the actual relationship, that what if is your brain's attempt to make sure there's no more chance to surprise you because you were surprised and it hurt, didn't feel good. We want to not do that again, right? Like that's the animal part of us. That's how we learn. And so that's what the brain's
Mm.
doing when it's like, well, what about this? What about this? What if I do this? What if this happens? And it's that anxious, like, let me think through everything possible because I cannot or I do not want to do this surprise and this pain again. So that's natural to do that. And it's okay to do that. It's the focusing on it and the following those what ifs through, that's not a good idea because you don't know. We don't know what happens after today, right? Like we just don't. And that's scary. Like that can be really scary. And so we want to know. So we want to think through all the options, but you're not going to know. You're going to be a different person once you've felt those emotions. And once you've gone through those emotions, you're not the same person. There's a fantastic quote. It's like, you can't step in the same river twice because it has changed and you have changed. Like you literally can step into a river, come out and step in again. And the seconds that went by or the water that went by, it's not the same. It's just not. And you're not the same person because a couple seconds ago. So there's no going back to anything really ever because it's never going to be the same. So
This is
the only
major.
thing
What
we
you're
can do is
saying
move
is
forward.
is so eye-opening. And it's so eye-opening because what you're basically saying, in other words, is regardless of what you just exited, it's
Hmm.
normal. Your brain is basically thinking, I just got shocked by this infidelity or
Hmm.
this episode that happened. So now my brain's anxiety reaction is, hey, what if, what if, what if? But what you're
Right.
saying is break free of that and understand that it's okay if the river looks
Hmm.
different, if you look different. What about if you said anxious? So anxiety comes in this part of our life when we're dealing with trauma. What if it's
Hmm.
traumatic? So, what if this breakup is not just painful, but it's traumatic? A lot of people could be listening to you, and I have to say, I listened to counselors when I was in a bad time of my life, and I say, there's no way that that counselor was on my side of the story because they're speaking
Hmm.
with no empathy and sympathy for the pain that I'm feeling, and only if
Yeah.
they were in my shoes, they wouldn't be speaking that way. So sometimes people could listen to you, but they still
Hmm.
don't believe what you're saying because they think maybe she's on the part that is actually the hurting, or the she's the person that
Hmm.
would break up with someone, but I'm on the other
Yeah.
side, so she would never understand.
Hmm. Yeah, so I would say that if we're involving that piece of there's no way to understand it, when someone is in that headspace, there is no way for anyone else to understand, and they're making sure of that, right? Like, and sometimes that's protective, and when that's happening, that's okay because our body and our brains are constructed to protect ourselves. Like, there's a reason that in general, for the majority of people, imperative is to stay alive, to survive, and to live another day. And so if you sometimes I have people who can't hear what I'm saying because they're not ready to, and that's totally fine. That's absolutely fine. And then there's some people who they see the facts of their situation instead of the emotions of the situation. And that I think so that's a broader issue, I think, because honestly, what I would almost boil the entirety of the issues of the world today down to is we're so stuck on the details that we forget the unifying emotion, right? So like I have felt abandonment and other people have felt abandonment, and undoubtedly other people's abandonment has been worse than mine if we're objectively putting them next to each other, right? That doesn't mean
Right.
I don't recognize
True.
abandonment, and that doesn't mean they don't. And so that's what we relate on. So anyway, I say that to say the piece of like the trauma that this person put me through is the reason that I'm doing this process this way. I say, yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And so your process is going to look different than the person who the ending was traumatic because it was an ending, but not because of the things that came before the ending. Does that make sense?
Mm,
So
that makes a lot of sense, and it's eye-opening.
yeah, when someone's like, you don't understand what I'm going through, my answer, because I get that, right? I have people come in and sit on my couch and they're like, you don't get it. And I'm like, you're right. Do I need to get it though? That's my question for them. Do I need to get it? Like where does the understanding that I need to get it come from? And where do you just need someone to hold that space for you so that you get it? Because chances are,
Mm.
if you're discounting other people's opinion because they don't get it, it's probably because you don't get it yet either.
Wow, you see? That's the therapist in you that came out and said, yeah, I like it. It's true. I mean, it's true. If wow, when we're hearing these things, I don't believe this conversation is just for people that are in a breakup phase right now.
Yeah.
This is I feel like we go through many breakups every day in a corporate way,
Mm-hmm.
in a,
Mm-hmm.
we lose people, new people come, and it's the same feeling to me personally. It's just in many different levels. Every
Yeah.
time a coworker leaves and we know we're not going to work together, that's a beautiful breakup because it's
Mm-hmm.
basically a soft form of a consensual I love you, you love me, but we're not going to work together anymore.
Right.
There's more toxic ones, but the hardest thing that I personally go through, and I'll be selfish and squeeze in a personal question, is how does someone with anxiety, and I truly believe that the majority of humans right now have a level of anxiety, regardless of how mature you are and connected you are. So,
Yeah.
how does someone wake up every day if they're not happy with their life or an aspect of their life and live with it, live and
Mm.
survive with the feeling of, I will no longer be with that person?
Mm. So when we spend the majority of our emotion and our energy looking at what we don't have, all we will see is loss. And so I think people forget that we can do both at the same time. We can miss and be sad about and grieve departures from our life, and also enjoy and be captivated by whatever glimmer you find that day. And without assuming that that glimmer is going to exist tomorrow, there'll be a new one tomorrow. So in my work with the church, and then my work since, I have what I would call at this point complicated grief from a bunch of the different losses and a bunch of different ways that things have worked, right? And every therapist has a therapist. If they don't, they should get one. So one of the things that
Wow.
I talk about in my own therapy is the fact that for me, I personify that grief almost a little bit like this is my buddy and this buddy is going to be with me. I'm still going to do my day and I might do things slower. I might engage slightly less. That's okay. But I'm also going to, while this grief is with me, I'm also going to do my next step because I don't know where my next step is taking me. And it could be 2 months down the road. It could be 2 days down the road. It could be a year down the road. I'm going to turn around and that grief's going to be less. And I'm not going to know how it happened
Mm.
because there's no roadmap to make that happen. I'm not going to know like when it started to shrink or when I got more space in my life for the pleasant things. I'm not going to know. And so expecting it to know when it's going to happen is unrealistic because once you are there, you don't know how it happened. And anybody who's gone through anything can attest to that, right? Like you don't know how it happened. You just know, like one day you just knew that things were better and you felt slightly lighter. And that's how you do your new life. But I think, and this is another across the board statement, our, our world went through a collective trauma a number of years ago. And I would argue still are in it. But when that happened, we rushed so quickly in different ways, personally and nationally and whatever else, to go back to what we knew because we were so scared of what could happen if we didn't. On an individual level, when you go through a trauma and when you're in grief, there are other people around you, hopefully, other people around you that can say, hey, you're not yourself. Like, are you good? Can we talk about this? Do you need support? And we didn't have that as like who does that when the whole world is doing it, right? Like who's turning
Right.
around saying, hey,
With a
world, you good?
collective.
Like that's not a thing. And so we weren't able to like pull each other back from that. And we rushed to not, we did not process the trauma and we didn't process the pain and we didn't process the fear. We didn't process any of that because we were in it and then we're done. We're out, right? And so that's like, if you look at that bigger picture, that's what we do regularly when we try to rush our process is we just go back into the same shit that we were in before because that shit's familiar. Like we default to familiar filters in times of stress. Like if you come from a family that doesn't talk about things, you are likely in times of high stress to not talk about things because that's what you knew, even if you've like developed coping skills aside of that, right? So anyway, all of this to say like the idea of moving forward with that grief is literally a what is your next step? You don't have to know what comes 5 steps in advance. You don't have to. You need to get yourself out of bed on the days you can get yourself out of bed. And on those days you say, hey, you know what? I got my ass out of bed. That's an accomplishment. I did it. I did that thing. And then find a way to reward yourself. Like I work with a lot of behaviorists at one of my jobs and we talk a lot about motivation, like what motivates people, because what motivates people is also what we can help them to utilize to alter their behavior in a way that serves them better, right? So like the function of a behavior, what's the function of wanting to stay in bed when you're sad? The function of it is because you don't want more things like bombarding you. That's why you want to stay in bed. Okay. So how do you protect yourself from the things that are bombarding you, but also get out of bed? And whatever that answer is for you, then that's what you do. And then you can get out of bed, right? Like, you look at the desire and the behavior, figure out what the function is, answer the function in a productive way that allows you to go about your day, and then you take your next step.
Put together the equation that will make it happen for your life, but understand that it's not going to look the same. It sounds very cliche, but it's not going to look the same. It's not. Yeah, and I have one final question for you because I think we discussed a lot of great things here, but it's better we don't leave people listening without addressing the loneliness part, which is the world could feel very lonely. And I believe from the research that we were able to review before today's episode, the highest level of loneliness that people experience is when there's loss of a loved one physically, like death, or a breakup. How can, let's say someone went through the closure, someone went through living with it, someone went accepting the grief, all of the different phases we spoke about. The hardest one is one of the final ones, which is that loneliness aspect. And I say it's the hardest, Kelly, because it stays with you when you're walking into the next relationship. So how can we tackle the loneliness that makes us feel this world is cold and everyone has their person, but I don't, and I don't want to be alone?
Yeah. So, and that's a great question. And I think about, so I'm married, and my wife is my person, like in every way, every single way. And the terror I have on a regular basis, the idea of losing her someday, hopefully
Yeah.
very, very far from now. Like that's, and so when you say that, I even picture that, like, what would I do if I lost her, and how do I move forward with, even with that healing and everything that might come? What do you do with that loneliness? And I think for me, and there's a very fine line between this and toxic positivity, and I'll be really clear about that. But for me, it becomes like, it's almost like a turn it around, like if you are able to reconnect with other people, right? Like we're assuming this person is connecting with other people, maybe moving on to another relationship, but they still have that loneliness, right? So in that assumption, because it's a very different question if they aren't able to connect with anybody else ever, right? So that's a very different situation. But saying they are, that lonely piece, that like puzzle piece that's missing, that won't ever be matched quite the same with anybody else, no matter how much you might love another person, or love another job, or create a family, if your family has been one that's been terrible for you to have in your life. That lonely piece of like, where is that person? And then that part of me that I knew they reflected back to me, that emptiness is a testament to that love that existed, right? So to
Mm.
not have that anymore, in a little way, does kind of cheapen that love, right? So, like, it's okay to have that loneliness. Like, you don't have to erase that loneliness to proceed with life, do you? Like,
Yeah, that's true.
that would be my question to people. Like, why do, if you are able to connect with other people, if that loneliness is helping you to, if that loneliness is keeping you from other people, that's a different story. If it's not, and you're moving into a new relationship, or you're moving into like a new job, or you've got new people coming into your job, whatever it is, or making a family when your family's not part of you anymore, that loneliness exists as a testament to the importance of that relationship
Mm.
and the importance of connection. And to lose that would lose that testament. It doesn't have to inform all of the ways that you exist, and it doesn't have to like um taint the things that you're doing now, but it also doesn't have to go away for you to have meaningful future.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Mm. You can live with it. You can live with it, and you can accept it. I think it's still a hard answer, but
It is. It's not
it's
a
reality, and
satisfying answer. Yeah.
no, but it's
Mm,
necessary. So on a closing note, I
mm,
would love to give you the mic and tell and let you give us a rundown of all the things that we had spoken about today, which are very different. I mean, we've literally covered
mm,
7 different topics in a way that I think could leave some people overwhelmed in some areas, which
mm,
is fine because I think the first step is understanding all the different moving parts. And then the
mhm.
next step is to process them individually. I do want to let everyone know that they can find you on YouTube.
My channel handle is at Kelly R Mentor. It's also Ask a Therapist. The easiest way is at Kelly R Mentor from YouTube. And then I have 2 Instagrams people can follow. I have one for my business, which is Anchored Counseling FL, all one word, Florida FL. And then there's Kelly R Mentor on Instagram. I'm also on Kelly R Mentor on TikTok. So my thoughts overall is that there is no good answer to any of the questions that people ask, the deeper questions people ask in life. And that sucks. It sucks. Like, we can't lie to ourselves and pretend like it doesn't. We also can't lie to ourselves and pretend like we can't, like we don't ask the questions because we don't want to have to explore the answer. I I wish that therapy was more accessible to people, because I think there's a lot of people who would really benefit from just a couple of sessions with someone, and just kind of like, I need to talk through this thing. Cool, cool. I'm done. And that would be so much easier, or so much more fluid when it comes to healing. But healing itself is a journey, like all of life is a journey, and losses are part of life. That doesn't make them easy, and it doesn't make them fun, but it also doesn't make them the worst thing in the world, because to lose, you have to have had at some point, right? So we can both, like, if anybody's going to take anything away from anything I've said, it's the reminder that we can hold both in ourselves and also move forward. We can hold the pain of loss and the potential joy or the joys that we're feeling in our day to day and carry both of them with us and know that what we're feeling is okay. Your feelings are good. Your feelings are valid. Whatever you're feeling, that's fine. Our feelings aren't the problem. It's when we deny them or when we act out of them in a way that
Hmm.
harms ourselves or others, right? Like it's the action associated with the feeling that can sometimes not be the best choice. But the feelings themselves aren't anywhere near as scary as the process of ignoring them, because that's the scary part. When you just
Wow.
ignore them and try to like scoot past them, they're gonna come back. They're gonna get you somehow. So like, just deal with them
Yeah.
and exist in them and know they're gonna fade, because it does fade.
Beautiful, Kelly. You've taught us so much. You've answered my questions. You've gone on to give a lot of wisdom, and I think I asked a therapist today, and I got all the answers. So thank you for your time. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate your support for the Pierre Subeh experience. Remember that you can watch it exclusively on Spotify and YouTube for now. Listen to it anywhere you stream your podcasts. And I just would love if you can share this with a friend, a family member, a colleague that you think should listen to it. And I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.